The Suicide Squad is the long-awaited follow-up to DC's 2016 Suicide Squad, a film so awful on every level that even decades from now, film schools around the globe will be applying it as a historic case study, teaching young, developing minds every facet of how not to make a movie. This time around, though, they got James Gunn to take the helm. Because of this, and other promising promotional material, like stuff that looked good, I chose to go to a theater and utter the words, "Yes, I'd like 1 ticket for the Suicide Squad, please." But you see, that one "the" makes all the difference, saving me an express trip to the nearest mental health facility. Gunn has a background in genre horror with Troma Studios, and his first feature film, Slither, is a horror comedy gorefest. He is himself a fan of DC Comics, and so actually cares about the material, and understands what this kind of movie, one with suicide in the title, is supposed to be. Now, this film differentiated itself from the first Suicide Squad in about the first 2 minutes of the movie. You start in a cell with Michael Rooker's character, looking like a serial killer in a Rob Zombie flick, and then you're shuttled through the induction to the Suicide Squad. Like, yeah, we know what it is, I don't care, give me 10 years off my sentence, fuck you. Then bam, we're storming a beach and jumping into the water side by side with Rooker. A brisk, exciting sequence that nails what Suicide Squad is supposed to be. Unlike, 20 minutes of #1 radio hits going by while 10 character introductions take place in a boring, nondescript facility. And this momentum is carried through for a long time until the final act, where the plot really starts to feel dragged out. It's that point we all know, the mandated raising of stakes to super proportions. Now, it was nowhere near as bad as these have been before, with CGI lightning nonsense.
I will destroy you!
But how can you match the sense of danger and balance the dark comedic tone and throw in inspiring, heartwarming moments that you want to be genuine while making everything an action-first experience? The first 2 acts are amazing, and exactly what I hoped for from a Suicide Squad movie. It incorporates horror into shots, and with the extreme gore and dark themes going on, like actually touching on some fucked up backstories, and the fact that this is supposed to be a death squad operating off the books for the US government, made up of the insane and incarcerated. It doesn't take place in an American metropolitan city, it's some small third world nation, as it would be, an expendable place with expendable people invaded by expendable military ops. And the use of the C and D tier comic book superpowers is perfect for this sealed-off reservoir for the unsightly byproduct of a world with super science and magic. You're watching these characters, but aware that you're in a room with psychopaths and idiots, on a mission with dubious morals, so everything is colored with a layer of bleakness. But James Gunn knows how to have fun with that, offering us loads of splatterhouse schlock and irreverent comedy. It helps that Gunn put the effort into using practical effects and built sets for a lot of this movie. Like, there's attention to detail. Gunn is always subtly pointing out the presence of death looming over the squad. Take, for instance, how many times guns are casually pointed at characters. There are many shots, if you notice, that use the cliché languages of editing. Like, the sequence when somebody's talking to a giant shark man and acts all friendly with them and shakes his hand and gives a goofy smile, and it cuts to that wider shot where you would normally be able to tell this is just setting up a stupid death. But it doesn't always happen. There's a lot of fake outs, and it makes me paranoid and makes failure a constant possibility for this squad of failures. It's what made Invincible an enjoyable superhero show. Real tension and fear in a genre whose tone rose side by side with the Cold War. I liked Harley Quinn in this movie. I liked Waller and her little office of workers who, what would these people do? Make a Deadpool and treat this like the scientists in Cabin of the Woods do. But of course, it ends with hope. There's good and even the lowest and all that. And you realize partway through the movie that a main cast and secondary cast is developing, based on how not really evil some of these members are. And that these special characters will not be in danger like the rest. And I liked Harley and all, but she's treated to some extra scenes in a Jailbreak side story that really exposes her cash cow status for the studio. Now going into this, I didn't know like 90% of these characters. Polka Dot Man, Ratcatcher 2, Peacemaker, or Deadshot 2. I haven't dug into DC and all these smaller powers and characters, but I enjoyed them and how their weird wonky powers were used. Overall, I give the Suicide Squad a 7 out of 10. A very positive 2 hours and 12 minutes. But remember, most of the movie I think deserves an even higher score. But as a complete package, it's watered down. It's the best superhero movie I've seen besides, and I checked my IMDb, The Dark Knight and The Incredibles. So if you like Marvel DC movies, or if you hate all these Marvel DC movies, I believe The Suicide Squad will be a lot of fun for you. Now, going into some spoiler territory. If you haven't seen the movie, I do recommend it. Go see it, and you can click off the video now. Alright, here we go. So back to the beginning of the movie, the whole lead up to the first mission on this beach told me instantly that this is not like other comic book blockbusters. They introduced these absurd characters like Weasel, a disgusting semi-sentient creature made of intentionally off-putting CGI, a detachable arm kid, and guy with a fucking spear. And they throw Harley Quinn and Boomerang from the last movie in there with the team, kinda just to send home how shitty Suicide Squad should come across. And they reveal that this party are pretty much sent into a war zone to die. Like, they all die. And not to some super witch demon, but a normal military unit, because guns are more useful than these fucking powers. And the whole clusterfuck of this first mission, with the obscene amounts of graphic violence, is perfect. And seeing a genuinely dark tone being embraced this way made me really happy. We are in the lowest of the low part of DC. That basement that's been kept locked for as long as you can remember, and every time you ask DC what's down there, they start to change the subject real quick. The other part I want to discuss is way ahead, the point where I think a solid, elegant movie turned into a lesser, bulkier version of itself. Harley is abducted, but it turns out the people of this small nation worship her as an anti-American or something. And the first part of it I actually really like. Harley becomes a princess and romances this dictator guy, only to turn around and shoot him literally like it was the what you say. But then there's a second dictator general guy, and Harley's side plot turns into a jailbreak, and while the action in the scene is amazing, it was also pure fan service, which reminded me again, Harley has no powers. Why is she stronger than the two super soldiers trained to perfection since birth by their tyrannical fathers? It's the beginning of the Suicide Squad losing its gritty tone and growing plot armor around its more important characters. Like, I'm glad you're never 100% ensured that Ratcatcher, King Shark, Bloodsport, or Harley couldn't be unalived at any moment. But by the time the giant starfish appears, I had the story kind of figured out. Lo and behold, everything in the final act happens as telegraphed. None of that shock, excitement, or bleakness of the first two acts. I mean, this is the kind of movie that could have a genuinely dark ending. And not like Avengers where, part 2's coming and they're gonna find some way to save the day. I mean, with the government secrets revealed and the squad's complete entrapment in this system, how does an ending this happy really happen? Like, is the Suicide Squad system good now because it actually made heroes out of these damaged characters? Thematically, an ending this happy is actually more sinister in ways than a bad end could be, because there's still that overarching evil of this whole operation, right? And I understand James Gunn is trying to avoid pushing the R-rated superhero film into just cynical violence for violence sake territory. But by the end, I feel like those studio heads were giving him some kind of ultimatum. Anywho, I'm excited to see what James Gunn does next. This feels like a step up for him as a director, and if he ever gets more freedom with the success he's having for DC, I think we could get many more insane scripts and ideas into theaters. And that's a result I think we can all agree would be a positive change for big studio movies.